The paper bag tore the way old paper does, soft and tired, giving up without much sound. An orange rolled once, then stopped against the curb as if it had decided it was done. Judge Leonard Gray watched it from the driver's seat with the calm he had practiced for decades. Calm was a habit. Calm was a mask that sometimes fused to skin. He shut off the engine and sat a breath longer than necessary, letting the afternoon heat settle into his bones. The car smelled faintly of lemons from the spray he used on the dash. It had been his wife's preference. He kept buying it anyway, as if a scent could convince the air to remember her. Outside, the neighborhood grocery looked the way it always did, peeling paint, hand-lettered signs, a bell above the door that rang like a timid laugh. Leonard had been coming here since before the benches had his name on them. Here, he could be a man with a list in his pocket and an ache in his knees. He picked up the orange, careful with his fingers the way you are careful with anything that might bruise. His hands were still large but no longer sure. He placed it back in the bag, smoothed the torn paper, and carried the groceries inside in 2 trips, refusing to let his pride ask for help. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of bread and detergent. Leonard moved slowly, letting younger bodies slide around him. He chose oats, broth, a small packet of tea. Ordinary things. A life stitched together by small needs. At the register, he paid in cash. He had a card in his wallet that could have made it faster, but speed had never been his goal. The cashier slid the receipt into the bag without looking at him too long, like she understood that being seen could feel heavy. Outside again, the sun struck the back of his neck. He lifted the bags into the trunk. The torn one threatened to spill. He rearranged it, patient, the way he had once rearranged language until it held. Behind him, a siren rose and fell, not urgent, just present. The sound slid across the street like a shadow. When the patrol car stopped, it stopped in a way that made Leonard feel singled out, even before a word was spoken. The door opened. Boots hit the pavement. Leonard kept his hands visible because his body remembered lessons his robe never erased. "Sir," a voice called. "Hey, sir," in the sedan. Leonard turned slowly. The officer was young enough to be his son. Pale hair, flushed face, sunglasses that hid whatever softness might have lived in his eyes. His hand rested on his belt, not on the holster, but near it. "Yes." Leonard answered. He did not offer his title. "You just come out of that store." Leonard nodded. "I did." The officer stepped closer, sunlight catching on the badge. "Got a call about a man matching your description. Possible shoplifting." The sentence landed with a dull familiarity, like a door that had closed too many times. Leonard felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger. Something older. Something tired. "I paid," Leonard said. "I can show you the receipt." "Where is it?" "In the bag," Leonard said, and then remembered the torn paper, the way things fall. He reached toward the trunk. "Don't," the officer snapped. Leonard froze. His hand hovered above the groceries, above the soft paper and the fragile bread. He swallowed. "All right," he murmured. "Turn around," the officer said. "Hands behind your back." Leonard stared at him. The street seemed too quiet, as if even the birds had chosen not to witness. He could hear his own breathing, thin and uneven. Somewhere in his mind, courtroom lights glowed. Somewhere else, his wife's voice whispered, "Be careful, Len." "Officer," Leonard began, "there's a misunderstanding." The young man's jaw worked. "Turn around. Now." Leonard obeyed because he had learned, with bruises long healed and lessons never gone, that dignity could be taken more quickly than breath. He turned, slowly, and placed his hands behind his back. When the metal closed, it bit like winter. The groceries sat open in the trunk, bread exposed to heat, the orange peeking from the torn seam. Leonard watched them as if they were a different life he was no longer allowed to touch. "You got ID?" the officer asked. Leonard's wallet was in his jacket pocket. Reaching for it felt suddenly dangerous. "It's in my pocket," he said, and waited. The officer pulled it out himself, too roughly, the leather catching on fabric. He flipped it open, eyes scanning, and a pause settled into his shoulders. He read the name. He read the line that said County Court. He didn't look up right away. Across the street, a woman stopped mid-step. The cashier from inside came out, hand shading her eyes. Leonard felt their gaze on his cuffed wrists. The shame was not for himself. It was for the world. For the fact that age did not grant softness, that a man could be honored and hunted in the same afternoon. The officer cleared his throat. You're a judge. Leonard said nothing. Silence was sometimes the last possession. You should have said that, the officer muttered. Leonard turned his head just enough. Would it have mattered, he asked, so quietly it felt like a confession. The question hung there. The officer shifted his weight, looking at the open trunk as if the groceries might explain everything. Then, almost gently, he guided Leonard toward the patrol car anyway. Not with violence. With procedure. With a hand on an elbow that still burned. Leonard lowered himself into the back seat, cuffs tight, knees protesting, and the door shut with a sound like a verdict. Through the glass, he could still see the torn paper bag in his trunk, spilling sunlight onto the bread. He blinked once, slow, and let the quiet settle over him like dust. The back seat smelled like old vinyl and antiseptic, a scent meant to erase anything human. Leonard sat with his wrists numb, the cuffs warming, then cooling, as if deciding how much of him to keep. The window hummed faintly with road noise. Each stoplight felt like a pause where the city held its breath and then let it go again without him. He thought of the way courtrooms sound when everyone stands. Chairs scrape. Shoes whisper. A collective inhale. Here, there was no standing, only the rattle of keys at the officer's belt and the low murmur of a radio dispatching other lives into motion. Leonard closed his eyes, not to hide, but to anchor himself. He counted breaths the way his wife had taught him during her long illness. In. Out. The body remembers what the mind refuses. At the station, the doors swallowed him. Fluorescent lights flattened everything they touched. The officer removed the cuffs with an apology that was not quite an apology, words shaped like caution tape. Leonard rubbed his wrists, skin angry and red, and nodded because nodding took less energy than naming what had been taken. They placed him on a bench near a wall that had learned how to listen without responding. The bench was cold. Leonard folded his hands in his lap. He noticed the small things because small things were safer. A poster about community trust peeling at the corner. A clock with a second hand that jerked forward as if reluctant to move. A different officer approached, older, heavier in the shoulders. He asked questions with a clipboard voice. Name. Address. Date of birth. Leonard answered because answers had always been his currency. When the questions ran out, silence filled the space, thick and awkward. I want to call my daughter, Leonard said. The officer nodded and slid a phone across the counter. Leonard dialed from memory. It rang longer than he wanted. When she answered, her voice was bright and unguarded, and it cracked something in him he had been holding together with habit. Dad, she said. What's wrong? I'm all right, Leonard said, because parents lie to save their children time. There's been a mistake. I'm at the station. Her breath caught. Are you hurt? No, he said. The truth, narrowly defined. I just need you to know where I am. I'm coming, she said. You don't have to. I'm coming, she repeated, and the line went dead. Leonard sat back. The bench pressed against his spine. He wondered how many times he had said those same words from the bench, from behind wood polished by generations of hands. How many people had he told to wait, to trust process, to believe that time would be fair? The thought tasted bitter now, like tea left too long. The young officer passed by once, then again, eyes skirting Leonard's face. Leonard felt no desire to speak to him. Words would only turn into evidence, and Leonard was tired of evidence. Hours stretched. Or minutes. Time behaved badly here. When they finally told him he was free to go, the words fell without ceremony. No explanation. No acknowledgement that something had been broken and not mended. Leonard stood slowly. His knees complained. He accepted his belongings in a clear plastic bag that made them look temporary, like a life borrowed. Outside, dusk softened the edges of buildings. The grocery store was closed now. His car sat where he had left it, trunk still open, groceries warmed and wilted. He closed it gently, as if not to startle the bread. He drove home with the windows down, letting the city brush past him like an indifferent hand. At home, The house greeted him with the quiet he had curated since his wife died. He set the groceries on the counter. The orange had rolled again and bruised itself. Leonard peeled it with careful fingers, juice running, sweet and sharp. He ate it standing, the way you do when you do not trust chairs to hold you. His daughter arrived with a storm in her eyes. She wrapped him in an embrace that smelled like rain and urgency. He held her until his arms remembered how. They sat at the kitchen table. She talked. He listened. He did not tell her about the way the cuffs felt, or the look on the young officer's face when he realized who Leonard was. He did not tell her how small he had felt, how old. Some truths were heavy and did not belong to children, even grown ones. Later, alone again, Leonard stood in his study. The robe hung on the door, black and patient. He touched it, then withdrew his hand. On the desk lay a stack of cases waiting for him to decide other people's futures. He sat and stared until the lamp warmed the paper. In the quiet, something settled that was not peace. A resolve without language. Leonard looked at his hands, still faintly marked, and felt the city breathe around him, unchanged. He turned off the lamp and let the darkness finish what the day had begun. The letter arrived in a thin envelope that looked ashamed of itself. Leonard recognized the seal before he opened it, the city's crest pressed into paper that had never held grief. He read it standing by the window, late morning light cutting the room into honest shapes. The words were careful. Regret was expressed without touching responsibility. An investigation had been completed. Policy had been reviewed. Leonard folded the letter once, then again, until it fit into his pocket like something small enough to carry without complaint. His daughter, Mariah, found him in the kitchen with the kettle screaming itself hoarse. She reached past him and turned it off. The quiet afterward felt earned. "They want to meet," Leonard said. She read the letter with her mouth set. She had inherited his patience but not his restraint. "You don't have to," she said. Leonard looked at the kettle, steam thinning into nothing. "I know." But he went anyway, because he had always gone. The conference room smelled of coffee and lemon polish, a scent he knew too well. Faces arranged themselves around a table, each wearing a version of concern that had been practiced in mirrors. Leonard sat with his hands folded. He did not bring the robe. He brought his age and the slow ache in his back and the memory of metal-biting skin. They spoke in turns, voices smooth. Words like protocol and training and community trust were placed carefully between sips of water. When they mentioned compensation, the number floated in the room like a balloon someone had let go of by accident. Leonard did not reach for it. He watched it bump the ceiling and hover. "I don't want an apology," Leonard said when it was his turn. His voice surprised him with its steadiness. "I want you to understand what you took." Silence followed. Someone scribbled. Someone nodded. Understanding, Leonard knew, was not a deliverable. After, Mariah drove him home. The city slid by, unchanged. "They're offering a settlement," she said, keeping her eyes on the road. Leonard nodded. "Money," he said, without judgment. "It's not nothing," she said. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." The lawyer arrived like weather, inevitable and measured. Papers spread across Leonard's dining table, covering old rings where his wife's mug had rested. The lawyer spoke of timelines and exposure and optics. Leonard listened, occasionally asking questions that revealed the depth of his knowing without announcing it. The number came back, firmer now. $1.3 million, as if precision could soften the blow. At night, Leonard dreamed of the bench. Not the courtroom bench, but the one at the station, cold and patient. In the dream, he sat while the clock refused to move. He woke with his heart working too hard, his hands tingling as if cuffs still circled them. He did not tell Mariah. He told the walls. Depositions followed. Leonard sat under lights that asked him to perform his pain. He answered plainly. He did not embellish. When asked how the arrest made him feel, he paused, because feeling was not something he had ever been required to define. "Reduced," he said finally. "And old." The young officer's name appeared on a page, then a face appeared across a table months later. The officer looked smaller now, his confidence folded in on itself. He apologized with words that trembled. Leonard listened. He believed the apology was sincere. He also believed sincerity did not rewind time. "I didn't see you," the officer said, voice cracking. "I mean, I saw you, but not." Leonard nodded. He felt no triumph, only a tired compassion that surprised him. "You saw what you were taught to see," Leonard said. It was not forgiveness. It was an explanation. The city council vote happened without him. He watched the recording later, alone, volume low. Hands raised. A number confirmed. The anchor's voice framed it as justice. Leonard turned off the television before the word finished forming. When the check arrived, it was heavier than it looked. Leonard held it between thumb and forefinger, as if it might bruise. The amount was printed in clean ink, commas standing at attention. He thought of the groceries, the orange rolling free. He thought of the bench, the cuffs, the way the officer's voice had snapped. Mariah stood in the doorway, uncertain. "What will you do?" she asked. Leonard set the check down. He looked around the house, at the quiet he had earned and the quiet he had been given. "I'll put it somewhere," he said, "so it doesn't get lost." They opened a new account. The teller congratulated him. Leonard nodded. Congratulations were easy. Meaning was not. That evening, Leonard walked to the grocery store. The bell rang. The cashier smiled. He bought bread and tea and oranges. Outside, the sun slipped behind buildings, leaving the street in a softer light. Leonard stood by his car, groceries in hand, and breathed. No sirens. No commands. Just the city, breathing back. At home, he placed the oranges in a bowl. One bore a faint bruise. Leonard touched it, then withdrew his hand. He sat at his desk and wrote nothing. The money sat elsewhere, quiet and immense, unable to reach him here. The room held its breath. Leonard let the stillness settle, a verdict without appeal. The city changed its routes quietly, the way cities do when they are ashamed. New trainings announced. New language polished. Leonard watched from a distance, not attending ceremonies, not offering quotes. He returned to the bench because routine steadied him, because the law, for all its failures, still needed hands that did not shake when holding it. The first morning back, he rose before dawn. The house breathed in its familiar way, pipes ticking, wood settling. Leonard dressed slowly, choosing a tie that had belonged to another season of himself. In the mirror, his face looked thinner, lines deepened by something not entirely time. He touched his wrists. The marks were gone. The memory was not. At the courthouse, the doors recognized him. A clerk smiled too brightly. A bailiff nodded with care. Leonard returned each gesture with restraint, saving his warmth for later. In chambers, he sat and let the quiet gather around him like a coat. He placed the case files in neat stacks, aligning corners. Order was a kindness he could still offer. Throughout the day, words moved through him. Arguments. Pleas. Testimony that smelled of fear and hope. Leonard listened the way he always had, with his whole body. He felt the familiar weight of choosing. He also felt something else, a hairline crack running through certainty. When a young man stood before him accused of a small theft, Leonard noticed the tremor in his hands, the way his eyes searched for danger. Leonard slowed the room with his voice. He asked questions that made space. The sentence he delivered was measured and merciful, within the law's narrow mercy. The young man wept. Leonard looked away. At lunch, Mariah called. She had started a foundation quietly, without his name in bold. A fund for legal aid, for grocery stores in forgotten neighborhoods, for training that taught officers how to see without shrinking the scene. Leonard listened. He did not correct her when she called it a way forward. He knew better than to name directions too soon. That evening, Leonard went home and opened the account statements. The number sat there, unchanged. He wrote checks slowly, deliberately, as if each signature were a conversation. He sent one to the corner store for repairs. Another to a community clinic. Another to a scholarship fund that would never bear his name. He did not give everything away. He left some untouched, because leaving was also a choice. Weeks passed. The city learned to say his name with care, then learned to stop saying it. News moved on. Leonard did not. He walked. He cooked. He read poetry aloud to empty rooms, letting the words stretch and sigh. At night, the dream of the bench visited less often. When it came, the clock moved. One afternoon, the young officer appeared in chambers unannounced, hat in hand. He looked older, not by years but by knowledge. He asked if he could speak. Leonard allowed it. They sat across from each other, no table between them this time. "I left patrol," the officer said. "I'm in training now. Different kind." Leonard nodded. "I hope you learn," he said. "I am," the officer said. "Every day." Leonard believed him. Belief did not heal. It opened a window. On a rainy morning, Leonard returned to the grocery store. The bell rang. The cashier waved. He bought bread and oranges. Outside, the rain stitched the street together, silver thread pulling edges close. Leonard stood under the awning, bag heavy in his hand, paper strong this time. A patrol car passed without stopping. Leonard watched it go. His chest loosened, just enough. At home, he placed the oranges in the bowl. He chose the bruised one first, cut away the dark, ate the rest. Juice ran down his wrist. He did not wipe it immediately. He let the sweetness exist alongside the sting. Later, he sat at his desk and wrote a letter he would not send. It contained no accusations. It contained no demands. It described a bench and a clock and the sound of a door closing. He folded it and placed it in a drawer with old receipts and a photograph of his wife laughing at something small. The drawer closed with a soft, final sound. That night, Leonard stood by the window. The city glowed and dimmed, breathing in waves. Somewhere, money moved hands. Somewhere, policies were revised. Somewhere, a young man learned to see. Leonard rested his palm against the glass and felt its cool certainty. He stood there until the room forgot him and only the stillness remained, unremarkable and complete.